Gas is being used in this war. Air raid sirens warn us of the approach of enemy planes. But in addition, if gas is dropped by the enemy, a special gas alarm will be sounded. Learn what gas alarm has been chosen by your community. It will be a hand rattle or a hammering sound like the beating of a dishpan. Gas is dropped from planes either as a spray or in gas bombs. But should enemy raiders use gas against your community, there is no reason for fear or panic. Because if you know what to do, you can protect yourself and safeguard your family against the menace of gas from the air. The ideal protection for civilians is an airtight gas shelter ventilated by a system which removes gas vapors from the incoming air. Such a shelter can be designed to provide some protection also against the effects of high explosive bombs. Some war gases can be seen by the eye, others are invisible. But it is important to know that most of them are heavier than air, and that they settle down and are most concentrated close to the ground. Hence, if no gas shelter is immediately available, go indoors and go upstairs. The gas at that higher level will probably be less concentrated than down near the ground. First precaution is to prevent gas from getting into the house. So, close all windows and shut off all ventilation or air conditioning units which are not equipped to remove war gases from the incoming air. If windows are blown out by high explosives, tack blankets over the opening. Close fireplace dampers. And if you live in a one-story house, seal all other openings around doors and elsewhere with cloth or rags. In a larger house, go upstairs. Don't go down into an unprotected basement unless you have a gas-proof shelter there. Wait upstairs until your air warden tells you that it's safe to leave. You may have to wait until even after the all-clear signal, for gas may still be present in your section. Some war gases are spread as liquids, which slowly evaporate, giving off invisible but poisonous vapors. This type of gas remains for a long time and hence is called persistent. Certain chemicals neutralize this liquid gas. And trained decontamination teams of the United States Citizens Defense Corps, which is the civilian protection force of your community, are equipped to neutralize the liquid gas so that people may go outside without danger of exposure to the liquid or its poisonous fumes. But these workers must wear special gas-proof clothing and masks for protection. The completeness of their protective clothing emphasizes the fact that without such special protection, you must stay indoors until notified that the liquid gas has been neutralized and that the air is free of harmful gas fumes. Liquid gas may also be washed away by a heavy rain or by a stream of water from a fire hose. Out in the fields where liquid gas has been dropped, dry chemicals that neutralize the liquid gas are mixed with the earth. This scene should remind us to stay off the grass after a gas attack. Persistent liquid gas and the fumes that it gives off may be lurking unseen and covered by grass or shrubbery for days or even weeks after it has dropped there. Another type of war gas is dropped as a vapor. This cloud gradually thins out and disappears in a few minutes. When it has cleared from the neighborhood, it is no longer a menace. Because this type of gas disperses quickly, it is called non-persistent. So after a gas attack, wait for your warden to tell you that it's safe to leave your house. If you should be caught outdoors when gas is dropped, hurry to shelter, but don't look up, because liquid gas might fall into your eyes. Every second counts. Act quickly now in applying first aid. There are certain simple steps you can take to prevent or minimize the harmful effects of war gas. If the liquid splatters onto your skin or clothing, or if you have been exposed to gas vapors, Remove all outer clothing outside the house, including shoes. This avoids spreading the gas inside. Remember, liquid gas spreads by contact like poison ivy. Leave the contaminated clothing outside to be decontaminated later. First, quickly remove as much of the liquid gas as you can by carefully blotting with dry cloth or absorbent material. Be careful not to smear or spread the liquid gas onto fresh skin areas. You must work fast. The liquid gas will cause blisters if not neutralized in a few minutes after exposure. You may use absorbent tissues to blot the liquid gas from the skin. Absorbent cotton may be used in the same way with equal success. Throw the contaminated materials used to remove the liquid gas into covered containers to be destroyed later on. Use ordinary household bleaching solution containing sodium hypochlorite to neutralize any liquid gas remaining on the skin. The exposed area of skin should be gently and thoroughly bathed with absorbent material saturated with the bleaching solution. Do not use rough cloths and do not rub with pressure, as this might cause irritation. And for safety's sake, rinse the hands thoroughly with the bleaching solution. Provided eyes have been exposed, they should be treated immediately. The recommended treatment for the eyes is a 2% solution of baking soda, that is, bicarbonate of soda. In order to be able to use this quickly, make this solution in advance by mixing a tablespoonful of baking soda in a quart of water. Keep this handy in tightly corked and properly labeled bottles. Now, to actually irrigate your eyes, fill an enema bag with the prepared baking soda solution. Have someone help you irrigate each eye with a steady stream for at least 2 minutes. Alternate back and forth from one eye to the other, so that injury from the gas does not develop in one eye while you are treating the other. If an enema bag is not handy, use a tea kettle or some other device that will pour a small, steady stream. Results will be improved if you can hold the eyes open. And if you can't find anyone else to help, you can irrigate your eyes yourself, even though it is awkward. Then get into a shower as quickly as possible. This removes the bleaching solution after it has neutralized the gas. Use plenty of soap and wash thoroughly, for by doing so, you are taking an added precaution in the event you may have missed some exposed area. And be sure to wash your hair before you're through. If you don't have a shower, stand in the tub. Soap yourself thoroughly. Meanwhile, fill buckets of water and pour them over you to substitute for the shower. Keep the drain open. Let the water run away. Don't sit in a tub full of water. It might spread the liquid gas over your body. After bathing, irrigate the nose with a stream of the baking soda solution. And to treat the throat, use the same solution as a gargle. If you haven't provided first aid materials in advance, don't waste time looking for them. Do the next best thing. Wash immediately after removing your clothes. Let water run into your eyes to help remove any traces of gas which may be in them. After being exposed to gas, you may start coughing or perhaps have a brassy taste in your mouth. Your lungs may feel heavy and oppressed. Maybe cigarettes don't taste like they usually do. In a case like this, you must lie down immediately. Relax. Don't exert yourself. Even if you feel all right, don't take a chance. Lie down, because exertion may aggravate your condition if you've gotten gas into your lungs. Tell your warden to notify the emergency medical service. And if blisters develop, don't touch or attempt to break them. Breaking them might start new blisters. Summon medical aid for proper treatment. Now let's go back to those clothes. The all clear has sounded and the warden has notified us that it's safe to come out. Don't touch the clothes. You might get liquid gas on yourself. A trained man from the United States Citizens Defense Corps will take them away to decontaminate them. Why does the enemy use gas against civilians? Well, gas bombs dropped by the enemy do not destroy our homes and factories as do high explosive bombs. War gas does not start the devastating fires that are the great menace of incendiary bombs. War gas does not shatter arms and legs as bullets and bomb fragments do. The real purpose of the enemy in using war gas is to spread fear and panic, to destroy our morale, and to cripple our war production. The enemy hopes that we will become scared and panicked, that the weapons our soldiers are waiting for will fail to arrive when crucial battles demand them. But you can thwart the enemy by not giving way to fear and panic, because you know what to do if gas comes. Remember, close all openings which might permit gas-laden air to enter the building. Use blankets to cover windows shattered by high-explosive bombs. Go up above the first floor. Don't go down into the basement unless you have a gas-proof shelter there. Stay indoors until your air warden tells you it's safe to leave. If you come in contact with gas outdoors, leave outer clothing outside the building. Time is your ally if you use it, so apply first aid as quickly as possible. Quickly remove any liquid gas by blotting. Be careful not to spread the liquid gas. Then, gently and thoroughly bathe the affected skin area with the bleaching solution. Wash each eye out for 2 minutes with a 2% baking soda solution. Soap and wash next. Use lots of soap, do a thorough job. Use either a shower or pour buckets of water over you in a bathtub. Irrigate your nose. And gargle your throat with the baking soda solution after bathing. Don't waste time looking for first aid materials. If you haven't provided them in advance, soap and shower immediately after removing your clothing. Wash your eyes out with plain water. If your lungs are affected, lie down to rest while waiting for the doctor to arrive. Or if blisters form, summon medical aid. Across the world's battlefronts, our fighting men are hammering the enemy with weapons forged in America's mighty arsenal of democracy. These are the weapons made and wielded by free men to answer the challenge of tyrants who would enslave us if they could. And they are the weapons which eventually must and will beat the Axis. Here at home, our weapons are a few simple household items. Bleaching solution, baking soda solution, soap and water. Yes, with these, we too can arm ourselves against the enemy, so that if gas comes, it will find us not panicked, but prepared.
Many troublesome and dangerous injuries occur during the normal activities of everyday life. A bad scalding in camp, a severe electric shock, or a cramp while swimming. If one knows what to do in such an emergency, much suffering may be prevented and many lives may be saved. First, consider a simple condition that may arise anywhere. A bug or tiny particle of dirt may get into your eye. When this happens, the eye must not be rubbed. Doing this may injure the delicate membrane covering the eyeball, resulting in an impairment of sight. Keep the eye closed, permitting tears to accumulate. If this is not effective, Further aid may be given if the following instructions are carried out. Inspect the inner surface of the lower lid by drawing the lid down, while at the same time the patient rolls the eyeball up. This inspection should be carried out very slowly. When the red inner surface of the lower lid has been fully exposed, inspect it carefully to see if any particles are adhering to the surface. If nothing is seen adhering to the lower lid, inspect the surface of the eyeball for a foreign body. Do not touch the eyeball unless you are certain there is a foreign body adhering to it. If nothing is found on inspection of the lower part of the eye cavity, then the inner surface of the upper lid must be inspected. Prior to this inspection, a matchstick is wrapped with clean cotton in preparation for removal of any particles which may be found. To roll back the lid, grasp the eyelashes of the upper lid with the left hand. Place a matchstick or pencil over the middle of the upper lid, turning the lid upward over the match. Any foreign body adhering to the inner surface of the upper lid may be easily seen. When a foreign body is discovered adhering to any part of the eye, it is carefully removed with a matchstick wrapped with clean cotton or the corner of a clean handkerchief moistened with clean water if available. The particle is merely touched with a matchstick or the corner of the handkerchief. If pieces of emery or steel have become embedded in the eyeball, they should be removed only by a surgeon. Another possible injury to the eye is from splashing acid. When this occurs, the eye should be immediately washed out with copious quantities of clean, warm water. After flushing the eye with plain water, it should be washed as soon as possible with an alkaline solution made from baking soda, magnesia, or chalk. Approximately 1 teaspoonful to a glass of warm water is used. If a strong alkali, such as liquid mortar or ammonia, gets into the eye, then the warm water washing is followed by the use of a weak solution of lemon juice or diluted vinegar as an eye wash. Foreign bodies lodged in the throat cause alarming and dangerous symptoms. As a result of sudden interferences with breathing, the patient clutches his throat and gasps for air. When this occurs, send someone immediately to telephone the nearest medical officer, notifying him of the nature of the trouble so that he will bring the proper instruments. In the meantime, hold the patient with his head and shoulders lower than the body. If this is not effective, raise the patient to a nearly vertical position, head down, and have someone slap his back between the shoulder blades. First aid treatment is continued until the foreign object is removed or until medical aid arrives. Fainting is caused by too little blood in the brain. For treatment of fainting, Place the patient on his back or side, with his head lower than the body and the feet raised. Loosen the clothing, particularly around the waist and neck. Be certain to loosen all constricting clothing. Apply cold water to the patient's face in this manner. And let him inhale smelling salts. Crowds have a tendency to gather around one who has fainted. Every effort must be made to keep people away so that the patient may have plenty of fresh air. Each summer, many people lose their lives through drowning. Many of them could be saved by promptly removing them from the water and applying proper methods of artificial respiration. Being underwater 4 or 5 minutes is generally fatal. However, an effort should always be made to revive the apparently drowned person unless it is definitely known that the person is dead. It is very important that artificial respiration be commenced at the earliest possible moment after the patient is on shore. Lay the patient face down and, grasping him around the waist, raise his hips so that any water may run out of his air passages. Use only a few seconds for this and then proceed with artificial respiration. The following scenes illustrate the Schaefer method. The face is turned to one side. To ensure the throat is not obstructed, the tip of the tongue is pulled forward out of the mouth. The operator now kneels, straddling the patient's thighs, facing the head, and places his hands with the thumbs nearly parallel to the fingers so that the little fingers curl over the end of the lowest ribs. The lower margin of the hand must be free from the patient's pelvis and resting on the lowest rib. It is better to have the patient's back bared so that the hands may be more properly placed. Constricting clothing should always be loosened or removed. It will be noticed that the hands are several inches from the spine and the fingers nearly out of sight. The operator's arm should be held straight and the pressure exerted from the shoulders by bringing his body and shoulders forward. The weight is gradually increased for 3 seconds. After each downward pressure, the weight is removed for approximately 2 seconds, and then the pressure is applied again. This alternating pressure and release is continued until the patient begins to breathe. While this is going on, have another person, if present, massage his limbs to maintain body heat. These measures should be continued for at least 2 hours. If more than one person is present, they should alternate in performing the artificial respiration, as the prolonged effort will be very exhausting. After the patient begins to breathe, watch him carefully to see that the breathing does not stop again. In case it does, resume artificial respiration. Aromatic spirits of ammonia held near the nose is helpful. After breathing starts, apply warm blankets and hot water bottles to the patient. Another accident calling for quick action by the rescuer is electric shock. The first consideration in every case is the rescue of the patient from contact with the current. Unless you take special precautions, you must not touch either the patient or the wire, or you will put yourself in the line of the passage of the current and will in turn receive a shock. You must act quickly, as the longer the electric current is allowed to pass through the patient's body, the more dangerous it is to him. The rescuer should insulate themselves before touching the patient by standing on dry raincoats, dry boards, rubber mats, or other non-conductive materials. Rescuers further insulate themselves by covering their hands with blankets, macintoshes, rubber gloves, or several thicknesses of dry cloth. Thus protected, they may safely touch the patient and effect the rescue. In case of a loose live wire touching a man but not grasped by him, a dry board or stick can safely be used to flip it away. Where a live wire cannot be safely flipped or pushed from contact, it may be cut by an axe or a hatchet with a dry wooden handle. As soon as the patient has been rescued from the current, a doctor must be sent for if one has not already been called. In the meantime, loosen clothing around the patient's neck, the chest, and the abdomen. Perform artificial respiration as shown for the resuscitation of a drowning person. Continue this measure for at least 1 hour, unless the patient breathes earlier without it. Cover the patient with blankets and keep him as warm as possible. Apply hot water bottles if available. Patients who are likely to recover will show signs of life within an hour. In the absence of a doctor, resuscitation measures should be continued for at least that long. Give stimulants such as smelling salts or spirits of ammonia as soon as the patient shows signs of reviving. Burns and scalds are not only dangerous to life, but are exceedingly painful. Prompt first aid measures will often save life and prevent much suffering. The effects of burns and scalds may be confined to the skin alone, or they may extend to the deeper tissues. In a first-degree burn, the skin surfaces will be slightly reddened. Such burns are not dangerous, but are quite painful. To treat such a burn, use a paste made of water and baking soda, or a paste of flour and starch, or 5% tannic acid solution or ointment can be used. The danger depends upon the degree, the extent of involvement, and the particular part injured, as well as the age of the patient. The burn should be protected from the air. When using the most convenient remedy, apply it in such a manner that the air will be excluded from the burned area. After the paste has been applied, leave exposed to the air, unless it is necessary to cover the area for transportation. Then cover the area with a light, clean cloth. In all cases of serious burns, the patient should be immediately seen by a medical officer. Pending his arrival, first aid treatment should be given to prevent or treat shock. If blisters have formed, the treatment should be the same. Blisters should not be broken or opened except by a medical officer. Sunstroke or heat stroke is a condition produced by excessive heat, whether in direct rays of the sun or under cover. It is a very dangerous condition. When a person is affected with sunstroke, his face is red, his pupils are dilated, his skin is very dry and hot, his breathing is labored and sighing, and his pulse is rapid and full. First aid treatment for sunstroke is directed toward immediate reduction of the body temperature. Quickly remove the patient to a cooler place. Loosen his clothing, or better still, remove it entirely. Make applications of cold water to the head and body, or cool the head and body with ice if it is procurable. If a bath is convenient, place the patient in the tub and chill the water by adding ice. In some cases, a bath may be improvised by using any waterproof materials which may be at hand. Place an ice cap or cold cloths on the patient's head. And when consciousness returns, have the patient drink water freely, but give no stimulants. The body should be rubbed briskly for some time to bring the blood back to the surface. Another condition caused by heat is a form of exhaustion. It is a condition that occurs frequently on marches in hot weather. The soldier becomes dizzy. His skin is pale and cold instead of hot, as in heat stroke. There has been profuse sweating. Such patients should immediately be removed to a shaded place and placed in a recumbent position face up. All such patients are deficient in body salt. So, in addition to rest in a shaded place, they should be given a glass of water containing about 1 teaspoonful of ordinary table salt. A more liberal supply of salt taken with meals might avert such an occurrence. Marching soldiers and others required to be on their feet a great deal are subject to blisters. Should a blister develop while marching, it is better to protect it immediately. A pin or needle is first sterilized by holding it in the flame of a match. Then the base of the blister is pricked with a needle and the fluid allowed to escape. Finally, the entire area is covered with adhesive plaster.
Looking board, isn't it? As safety director of this plant, I'm pretty proud of it. I guess we've all got a right to be proud of it. For the results of that safety record sure show up in these production figures. Yes, sir, we're in pretty good shape now. But it wasn't always so. I don't want to tell my story. The key man of the story, the guy who really counts, is Steve Mendarek, a foreman in Department 42. This is his story. You know, a safety director can do a lot of things, but he's really powerless without the help of the foreman, who has the direct contact with the men. The foreman, to my mind, is the precinct captain of any plant. It's up to him to get out the votes for safety. Well, let's go back to the Steve Benderick story. Just a few months ago, the plant safety record was really slipping. The reason was an increase in the production schedule that required the hiring of a lot of new men. Well, to start the ball rolling, we recommended to top management the need for a thorough safety program, and right now. But the big job lay ahead, a job for the foreman.
I'm Steve Benderick, the guy the safety director was talking about. I remember the day this whole deal started. Bob Ryan, our division super, sent word that he wanted to see me first thing after lunch. I had a kind of a hunch what it was about, but I couldn't be sure. Bob and I are old-timers at the plant. We've been buddies for a long time. But Bob's the kind of a guy who you never know just what's on his mind when he flags you into his office. I knew one thing, though. With this stepped-up schedule they'd put in, I couldn't remember a time when there was more going on around the plant. They sure had us hopping. Bob gave me the suspense treatment for a while. An old trick of his he always pulls. And finally, he opened up. He asked how are things going in my section, as if he didn't know. Not too bad, I told him, considering the new schedule increase. Not too bad, huh? Well, maybe you'd like to take a look at this. So I took a look. It was the latest up-to-schedule report. It read like bad news. My section didn't show nearly what it should be. So what? It ain't the worst record in the world. But Bob gave me a lot of stuff about, for a guy with my experience and production record, this kind of performance was a big nothing. I guess I was pretty weak with my excuses. I tried to convince him of the big turnover in my section, all the new green hands we had taken on. It put me in a bind, and I couldn't push too fast because of safety. After all, I was always being criticized about being too loose with safety. You see, I always figured a good worker, well, he's got enough sense to look out for his own safety. But Bob, he just wasn't buying any. In fact, I really led with my chin when I talked safety. He gave me the word from the top about the push on safety and warned me it was about time I got a new attitude, especially on foot safety. Well, here it was again, that old song and dance about safety shoes. And right there was where I put my foot down. I got time study men running around, scheduling department on my neck, engineering on my neck, personnel, union grievances, 60 million things I didn't have to worry about 10 years ago. And now you want to make a shoe salesman out of me. In all the years I've been at the plant, I never wore those clodhoppers. And if anybody wants to wear them, it's fine with me. But I ain't going to push them on my men. I'm no nursemaid. Okay. So I blew my top. And then, you know what that crazy Ryan did? He offers me a cigarette and says the reason he called me in was because I was up for promotion. Now, how do you like that? The general foreman was retiring, and Bob had recommended me to the works manager at their last staff meeting. Wouldn't you expect a trick like that from that guy? He told me I'd better get on the ball with this safety business, because management's eye would really be on me now. He suggested I hold a special safety meeting for my section on the following Wednesday, and especially on foot safety. I didn't like the idea too much. I wasn't sure what the guys would think, me pulling a lecture like that, but what could I do? I had to go along. I told Bob I'd investigate all the angles for the meeting, but I wasn't going to push anybody into anything. The Bendericks are a bull-headed bunch. I'd have to be convinced first. Funny thing, now that I had decided to keep an open mind on this thing, I started to worry about a few things here and there. I went right back to my desk, but I couldn't concentrate so good. It was almost like management had its eye on the back of my neck. Maybe Bob was right. I could see the story right there in the quality control chart. The regular operator on the balancer was sick. Well, we did all right while the grinder filled in, but last week he lost the tip of his finger. And you could see right there, the day the milling machine operator took over. You could see it go down. And the thing about a balancer operator, he can always hold it on the nose, dead center of tolerance. A good operator, well, he knows just where he has to hold it. Safety record, production record. I guess I was on my way to some deep thinking. Well, the thing to do was to start right off. Ask myself some questions about safety and find some answers. How did I really feel about this safety deal? When I thought about it, I knew there were some things I'd never give a second thought to, like safety glasses and goggles. I wouldn't let any man in the section work without them. Always the danger of flying chips. Then you take the matter of tools. No man ever works for me with unsafe tools. A cracked handle on a hammer. A chipper with a mushroomed head. A bent drift pin. Now, nobody has to tell me about safety campaigns with things like this. You just know it's wrong. Loose sleeves. And nobody has to tell me about that. A drill press operator can't take a chance reaching past a spin and chuck with a loose sleeve. Well, I was checking out all right in this investigation after all. Sure, I was safety-minded. But about that safety shoe business, well, I gave Ryan the benefit of the doubt. Decided to have a look at where and how foot accidents might happen. What if there was the wrong kind of blocking on that collar? A piece could slip off before the guy got a good clamp with the hoist. Could be pretty rough on a foot, all right. What if somebody didn't notice? Missed a bent hook on a conveyor. Crash. You'll never need those toes again, buddy. Or what if some joker wants to reposition a heavy drum, maybe? Rock it back. Using his foot for a break. Okay? 1 point for their side. There's lots of ways in a plant where a man might mess up his foot. But so far, I hadn't budged off my first idea. If a fella knows what he's doing, if he's careful, he shouldn't have to wear any safety shoes to keep his toes out of trouble. Well, call me stubborn. That's how I felt. And that's how it stood at the end of that first day. I was describing the whole thing to my wife's kid brother, Dick, in the locker room. Oh, I didn't mention that Dick works in my section. Came to the plant right out of service. He's a drill press operator. Darn good one, too. Dick always was the brains of the family. That kid's right up to the minute, sharp as a tack. So anyway, when I got around to telling him about my safety investigation for the big meeting and what I thought about it all, darned if he didn't tell me that he's been wearing safety shoes himself. Said it was a plain, sensible thing to do. Said he likes them fine. Well, he even has a pair of those things for dress. Well, like I said, if a guy wants them, fine by me. That's his business. Some of the other men gathered around, men from other departments, new fellas and old-timers. And I drew them into the act. And everybody had a different idea. Some were for safety shoes, some were against, some didn't care. It was pretty much like I figured. I still didn't see that it was my job to force anybody into foot safety. My personal investigation picked up first thing in the morning. After all, I never gave much thought to these safety shoes. So I dropped by the plant shoe store to get a line on them. And I discovered that these shoes did a lot more than just keep your toes from getting smashed up. The man showed me that they were darn good work shoes, built to wear. Now this I went for. Do you know that they got soles that resist oil, acids, heat, what have you? And on top of that, some of them are water repellent. But he figured that, like a lot of guys, I had some notion that safety shoes had no style, no class. Well, it really floored me when he told me how many styles you could choose from. And you don't have to buy a special pair for work. If you're fussy about style, you can buy a pair of safety dress shoes and then use them for work when they get scuffed up. Well, he wanted me to try on a pair. I didn't know but that he couldn't fit me. You see, I got a pretty oddball-sized foot. Well, this turned out to be no problem. These safety shoes can be had from AA to EEE, size 4 to size 15. And the big thing to tell my men, he said, is that here, like in most plants, they can buy them at cost. Well, that naturally makes them cheaper than ordinary shoes. And on top of that, they can get them on payroll deductions. Not bad. Not bad at all. Can't tell the difference from regulars. Give them a whirl, he said, and let me know what you think. Okay, it was a deal. What did I have to lose? I went back to catch up on some work. I had an appointment with the insurance supervisor before lunch, where I was slated to get some more answers. But while I was gone, word came for me to meet him at the medical department. Here it was again, as if I didn't have enough problems. Another accident. It was my lathe operator. He stepped on a skid. A 500-pound shaft tipped over, landed right on the big toe. It was bad. He had to lose the toe. And at a time like this, boy. In my own way, it looked like I'd be hurting as much as he was. The insurance supervisor finished questioning the lathe operator, and then I put it right to him. This makes the second accident in my section in a little over a week. The grinder, he's been out for a week so far. It's been murder trying to replace him with the present schedule. I'm behind in parts, 500 pieces the first week. I put it to him. How much is this costing my department? Well, he hauled out his book of figures, and brother, did he open my eyes. Counting this accident to the lathe man, there was a total of 5 lost time accidents in my section so far this year, adding up to 39 lost days to date. In rough figures, that amounted to at least 2,500 pieces lost, and at an average direct labor cost of about $5 per piece. My section showed a loss of $12,500 for a 6-month period through accidents. And that wasn't the end of direct costs. There'd have to be a settlement on this man's toe, and that might be as high as $1,500, permanent partial disability. Then he went on to indirect costs, replacements who aren't familiar with the job, not only lost time, but more scrap, the time lost by men standing around at the time of the accident. It's a rough picture, he told me, and the only reason it hasn't been worse is that I've made up a lot of the loss by doing a good job of maneuvering around manpower. Then it hit me. I knew what Ryan was talking about. Management was challenging me. They felt I was the guy for the promotion because of how I handled the section in spite of my safety record. But I could see where I was costing management. I really felt the eye on the back of my neck now. Maybe it was about time for me to be convinced. And for the rest of that week, the results of increased schedule and accident costs rolled in. Production went down. Scrap piled up. And I was beginning to wonder if I'd ever be a general foreman after all. Funny how it works. Seems like you can never get really convinced about anything till it hits close to home. I wasn't even thinking about safety or shoes or feet that weekend. It was time to relax and play with the kids and watch my wife work. But with all the thinking I've been doing that week, I couldn't help reading new things in what I saw. It's funny how you take something like your feet for granted. I mean, here were my kids, healthy, happy, having the fun that kids can have on healthy feet. Well, I was off again, thinking, trying my safety speech. It was starting to add up. The idea was really on top of me. I guess I was so lost in the idea that my ears couldn't pick up the sound that was bearing down on me around the corner of the bush. But I was lucky. I completely forgot that I was still wearing those safety shoes I got at the plant. He wanted me to give him a whirl, to see what I thought. I could tell him what I thought, all right. I thought that a toe injury can knock a man out of his job more than almost any other kind. And men like us stood a much better chance of accident than almost anybody else. Well, I was looking for answers. And, brother, now I'd had it. No more questions. I was pretty well sold now, but if I needed a final convincer, it came the morning of the day my safety meeting was scheduled. The milling machine operator who was filling in on the balancer was home sick. I was really sweating it out. I had nobody left to take over. But my kid brother-in-law, Dick, volunteered to save the day till the milling machine operator got better. I wasn't sure at first. The kid was still pretty new. But I checked him out, and he looked like he did okay. Because Dick is naturally a darn sharp kid. So I kept my fingers crossed and went back to my own work. But I felt something coming. It was bad enough trying to keep up with the new schedule under normal conditions. Once the deck is stacked against you, you get dealt one bad hand after another. Not a half hour had passed, and Dick was really hustling. He signaled to a trucker to move in with a work saver and pick up a load of stock. Well, the trucker was one of the new men, and he was in too much of a hurry. He started to move out. But the work saver didn't do any more damage to Dick than the power mower did to me, because Dick had enough sense to be protected. That was the convincer. As a foreman, I had some convincing to do to my men. The guys all knew what the meeting was going to be about, and they were ready, believe me, because they could see for themselves what accidents were costing our section. I started right in telling them what the insurance supervisor told me, and mentioned some statistics that show that 1 out of every 10 accidents in the industry are foot and toe injuries. Then I went on to point out how many people who work in different ways would never think of doing what they're doing without safety protection. I showed them how these safety measures are taken for granted, like the way I felt about using proper tools. I asked them how many arc welders they knew who didn't wear shields, or handlers of sharp metal who didn't wear gloves, or how many catchers that took a fastball without a mask. I told them everything. Everything I'd learned the past week. Everything that happened to me. I warned them that in work like ours, a toe accident could happen anytime to any of us. And then I showed them the margin of safety for guys like us. This steel box toe, the greatest protection against damaging toe accidents, with the anchor flange, which stops the box from tilting or cutting down through the sole under heavy impact. Here's what we had to have, every one of us. This is what kept Dick's toes from being mangled this morning. And I pointed out that this steel protection weighs less than this cube of foam rubber. Then I gave them a demonstration of just how much punishment this anchor flange box toe will take. After the power mower incident, I made a home movie with my camera. With my wife driving the car, we ran a little experiment. First, with a regular shoe. Then we tried it with a safety shoe. The margin of safety, even under a couple of tons pressure. I was convinced, and I wanted them to be convinced. I thought of myself. I thought of Dick. I thought of my kids. I guess I was really wound up. I made those guys see that we can't take our feet for granted, that they're too important to our work, our health, and our happiness to quibble over this small margin of safety. I wanted 100% safety in my section from now on. Well, I guess you know the end of the story. Safety went up, production went up, my paycheck went up. Brian dropped by to give me the glad hand. On the way out, he gave me the rib about now that I've moved up, I don't have to wear safety shoes anymore. And was I surprised that these fancy jobs had fooled him, of all people?
Very many occasions call for a violent exertion of your muscular strength. While so engaged, you may feel a sudden pain in your back, in your side, or in one of your limbs, and you say that you have strained a muscle. The pain may pass off in a few hours, or it may cripple you for a longer period, or you may have incurred some lasting disability. Most strains can be avoided by a knowledge and an understanding of the body's movement mechanism and its active parts, the muscles and the bones. All our active body movements are the work of the muscular system in combination with the bones of the skeleton to which they are attached. All muscles, no matter of what size, shape, or location, exert force by their power to contract. To understand how strains develop, let us first look more closely at a single muscle, such as the biceps of the arm and portions of the bones to which it is attached. On removing a portion of the muscle, it is seen to consist of spindle-shaped bundles of muscle fibers, the meat of the muscle. Thin layers of so-called connective tissue separate the fiber bundles, which, when seen in a vertical section, form sheaths, enclosing individual muscle fiber bundles. A complete half section shows that the connective tissue sheaths unite to form the tough tendons which fasten the muscle to the bones. Strains may occur within the muscle, in the tendons, or in the latter's attachment to the bones. Within the arm, the biceps is attached by two tendons to the shoulder blade above and by a main tendon to the radius of the forearm below. Here are these structures represented in diagrammatic form. When the muscle contracts, it raises the forearm and remains so contracted as long as we will it. Thereafter, we may let the arm fall back by its own weight, or if resistance, here indicated by an arrow, is present, then we must call upon another opposing muscle, the triceps, to pull the forearm back to its former position. This is because muscles cannot push against an opposing force. They can only pull by contracting. Biceps and triceps are good examples of opposing muscles. The principle of opposing muscles is an important factor in the understanding of the mechanism of body movements, whether of a large range or an almost imperceptible one. As for instance, standing still, the balancing action of opposing muscle groups of the whole as these movements are nearly every to lever action by the bones and levers, kinds, or orders. First order, the pivot or fulcrum, between the weight or resisting force B, force C. Nodding the head is caused by one of the few examples of a first-order lever in the human body. Its action here is of a double or alternating character. Within the head, the skull at its base is connected with the first. The skull represents the lever arm. Opposing muscles in front and in back of the neck bones cause the nodding movement by alternating contractions. A lever of the second order helps us lift our whole body weight when we rise on our toes. This type of lever has the pivot A at one end of the lever arm, the moving force C at the other end, and the resisting force B between the two. A long movement of the moving force results in a shorter but more powerful motion of the resisting force. The foot, and seen in diagram, the toes, the middle foot, with the heel bone represented as a whole, the tibia, and the calf muscles, attached to the heel bone by the Achilles tendon, are the active parts. The ball of the foot represents the pivot A. The resisting force B is at the ankle joint, and the moving force C at the end of the Achilles tendon. The strong calf muscles make a long pull to raise the weight of the whole body over a shorter distance. A lever of the third order has the pivot A at one end of the lever arm, but the resisting force B is at the other end, while the moving force C lies between the two. Bending the arm is a good example of the many third-order lever movements of the body. These three fundamental lever actions are present in an endless variety of combinations and degrees in all our body movements. With more than 300 individual bones and more than 600 muscles to account for their number and their complexity. Knowing how to use them intelligently will help to avoid injuries and strains. As an instance, if you try to lift a heavy weight off the floor, do you bend over like this? If you do, you may soon say, "Ouch, I tried to lift something too heavy for me and I hurt my back." But was it really too heavy? Or did you lift it the wrong way? Let us see what lever action you were using. Here is the body in a bent-over position with an outline of the skeleton. Notice particularly the backbone, which is not solid and rigid, but is a flexible column composed of individual vertebrae and an indication of the muscles that are to bear the brunt of the lifting effort. Seen in the form of a lever, the hip joint corresponds to the pivot A, and the lever arm to the flexible backbone. Like the backbone, the lever arm is represented as consisting of rather than a rigid rod. The resisting force B is near the extremity of the lever arm. The moving force C is applied along the lever arm and is furnished almost entirely by the back muscles with some help from muscles near the hip joint. During this lesson, these muscles are called upon to raise not only the heavy weight, but also the weight of the body trunk, and at the same time, to transform the curve of the lever arm into the shape of the backbone with the body in the upright position. Thus overtaxed, back muscles are liable to become afflicted with a strain. Now, contrast that way of lifting with one that is sensible and safe. With the body and its skeleton in this new position, you notice at once that the backbone is almost upright. This relieves the back muscles almost entirely, not only of the body weight, but also of the weight to be lifted. Instead, a whole series of strong leg muscles is ready to take up the work of lifting by means of a system of levers which now represents the corresponding parts of the skeleton. The lifting movement now carries weight upwards in an almost perpendicular direction, all levers contributing evenly in both directions. The stationary pivot, A1, is at the ball of the foot. Another pivot, A2, is at the ankle. A third, A3, is at the knee, and a fourth, A4 at the hip joint. The backbone, already in its upright position, is now represented by a solid column. Notice that the resisting force B is now almost directly over the whole lever system, which thus can function to the best advantage. Here then, instead of only one lever, there are 4 levers and 4 sources of muscular power. Any one of these may quickly relieve any undue strain that may be imposed accidentally upon any other. While the work so done is the same as in lifting from a bent-over position, it is now distributed so as to impose no more than a reasonable share upon all active parts. On the abdomen are 5 weak or danger spots where faulty posture during effort may result in so-called rupture or hernia. 1, near the navel. 2, right and left in the fold of the groin. And 2, right and left at the middle of the upper part of the thigh. First, let us explain what causes these weak spots. The bones of the pelvis give attachment to the muscles which cover and protect the abdomen. But near the navel, for instance, is a region underneath the skin which is covered only by thin layers of tissue. These may occasionally give way to allow the formation of an umbilical hernia. Much more important are these regions, which you see here in more detail. In the region of the groin, only tendons of several abdominal muscles come together to form a kind of passage or canal closed only by rather loose tissue. This may give way to permit the formation of an inguinal hernia, the most frequent kind, particularly in males. In this region of the thigh, there is a similar but shorter canal through which pass large arteries and veins on the leg. This canal may permit the formation of a femoral hernia, which occurs more frequently in women than in men. Now, the abdominal cavity is filled with freely movable intestines and with other organs besides, and it is roofed over by the muscle called the diaphragm. Here, in a diagrammatic, upright side view, we see the space occupied by the abdominal cavity, roofed by the diaphragm. Now, with the body in the bent-over position, compare the size of this space with that of the upright position. It has become much smaller. The diaphragm and the abdominal muscles are contracted, compressing the contents of the abdomen. Under the strain of this compression, a loop of intestine may be forced into one or more of the weak areas until it forms a bulge under the skin and is then known as hernia. Hernias can be avoided or at least minimized by avoiding unnecessary muscle strains. Muscular strength should be applied so as to distribute the total effort over as many of the body's muscles as possible and so as to make the best use of the body's various levers. If you have to push a heavy object, don't do it this way. Do it this way. If you must lift something difficult to handle, don't try it alone. Get someone to help you. And be sure your footing is good. Don't use carelessly the strength nature gave you. Play safe. Avoid the danger of strains. A moment's reckless effort may cause pain and suffering, or even a permanent injury.
Jones is visiting one of the laboratories at the City Health Department. His brother Frank has recently taken a position as a bacteriologist with the department. Ted seems to be having a little trouble.
Can't you get it focused on the field, Ted? Try using the fine adjustment knob. And do it more slowly. You're likely to miss the cells you're looking for, even though they may be there.
Okay, I'm trying. Say, here they are. Here, look.
Good. You know what kind they are?
No. All I know is that they came out of that test tube that you gave me.
Then they're one of the kinds of bacteria that cause food to spoil.
Ted has just seen one of the many kinds of bacteria. Bacteria are found almost everywhere in our environment. Some float around in the air. Some are in water or other liquids. Still others thrive in the soil. Bacteria are plants, but they are not green like the plants we usually see. Some kinds are indispensable. For example, countless bacteria are at work in this clover field. They are growing in the little nodules at the plant roots. Bacteria in these nodules take nitrogen from the air and change it into a form of plant food. Other kinds of bacteria are responsible for milk or cream becoming sour, the development of flavor and other qualities in cheese, and the disintegration of dead plants and animals. In fact, the effects of bacteria are so important that life as we know it would be impossible without them. Most bacteria are friends of man. Some even produce chemicals called antibiotics that are used to help fight different diseases. Only a few kinds of bacteria cause disease. Probably the first person to observe bacteria was Anton van Leeuwenhoek, inventor of one of the first successful microscopes. After looking through his crude microscope, he made drawings of the microorganisms he saw. These represented organisms from tartar scraped from his own teeth. In contrast, here, using a modern microscope, we see other microorganisms taken from tartar. After the time of Leeuwenhoek, generations were to pass before another achievement of great importance would be made in the study of bacteria. It was the famed chemist Louis Pasteur of France who in the 1850s proved that bacteria cause fermentation. This explained many of the chemical changes that go on in nature. Pasteur also proved that bacteria never develop out of dead organic matter alone, as some people had believed. He emphasized that bacteria can only come from other bacteria. Soon afterward, it was found that bacteria can spread disease from a sick animal to a healthy animal. But this discovery was made by Koch, a German contemporary of Pasteur. This discovery is the basis of the germ theory of disease. Robert Koch and his assistants also learned to prepare and use nutrient materials. Nutrient materials are usually jelly-like emulsions or fluids, which favor the growth of bacteria. Koch made other discoveries that helped lay the foundations of modern bacteriology. Since the time of Koch, much has been learned and many other kinds of bacteria discovered. Today, if Ted could collect all known kinds of bacteria, he would have thousands, and the facts that have been discovered about them are exceedingly numerous. He wonders how a beginner can ever learn about so many kinds of bacteria. Frank explains that it takes a systematic approach. For example, bacteria may be separated into groups according to what they live upon, the nature of the food they require. Some bacteria are parasites, others saprophytes, and still others autotrophs. Parasites depend upon living plants or animals for food. Here are some parasitic bacteria. Most bacteria that cause human disease are parasitic. Saprophytes live upon dead plants or animals or their products. Saprophytic bacteria produce enzymes that cause the chemical breakdown we call decay. There are more kinds of saprophytic bacteria than of any other type. Autotrophs get their energy from minerals or other inorganic materials. The autotrophic bacteria seen here live upon a form of iron. Through oxidation, they change one form of iron into another and use the energy that is released. Unlike the large majority of plants, most bacteria have no chlorophyll with which to manufacture food. Parasites, saprophytes, and autotrophs all take in food through their cell walls. To pass through these cell walls, the food must be soluble. In some instances, insoluble foods are converted into soluble materials by chemicals released by the bacteria themselves. All bacteria require soluble food to live. Ted thinks the information seems complicated, but Frank, speaking from experience, explains that the basic facts about bacteria are quite simple and very useful. Besides facts about the food getting of bacteria, Frank describes another type of information that is especially useful in bacteriology. Depending upon the structure or shape of bacteria, there are 4 main kinds. The cocci, that are round like these, that are common in the air. The bacilli, that are rod-shaped like these from gas gangrene. The spirilla, that are spiral like these taken from a sample of well water. And the filamentous forms, such as these thread-like ones. Structure or shape is one of the principal characteristics used by bacteriologists to classify or identify different kinds of bacteria. The life processes of bacteria are simple. We've already seen how bacteria obtain food. Now we will consider their reproduction, which takes place through simple division of the cells. In drawings, we can see that bacterium cells are continually growing. When a cell reaches maturity, it divides again. This goes on and on about every half hour, as long as the food supply holds out, or until some unfavorable condition slows down or stops their development. The reproduction rate of bacteria may be greatly affected by temperature. In a laboratory, the temperature can be controlled in an electric incubator. As Frank explains, there's always a temperature that's best for growing bacteria. Usually, this temperature is about 30 to 37 degrees centigrade. 37 degrees centigrade is about equal to the normal human body temperature. In case the temperature is unfavorable, some bacteria, especially the rod-like kinds, have a special means of protecting themselves. They do it by forming spores. Notice the spore forming in the center of one of these bacterium cells. Some other kinds of bacteria form spores at the ends of the rods instead of at the centers. Either way, a spore has a special wall around itself that seems to protect the bacterium inside from such adverse conditions as cold, heat, sunlight, or disinfectant. Later, when conditions improve, the spore may change back again into the rod-like bacterium. Not many disease-producing bacteria go through a spore form. Besides protective mechanisms, some bacteria are equipped to move about. The hair or whip-like parts attached to these bacterium cells are called flagella. Different types of bacteria have different types of flagella. Such flagella can be moved to propel a living bacterium through blood or other solutions. Not all bacteria have such means of locomotion. Since the time of Leeuwenhoek, progress in bacteriology has been phenomenal. His successors, such as Pasteur of France and Koch of Germany, have made discoveries and invented techniques indispensable in successfully preparing nutrient materials, growing cultures, and subjecting the cultures to tests that help identify and classify bacteria. Today, in bacteriology laboratories, work is conducted that leads to the control of the relatively few bacteria that are foes of mankind, and to the more effective use of the multitudes that are friends, in order to make human life more healthful and increase our standard of living.
Lieutenant Williams, a police officer attached to the Juvenile Division. I'm on my way to Monroe Junior High School to talk to a group of young people. That looks innocent enough, doesn't it? Lots of young people hitchhike. Seems like a good way to get from one place to another. But sometimes there are dangers involved that never meet the eye. Let's take the case of Jimmy Barnes. Jimmy played baseball all afternoon, and he didn't feel like walking home, so he decided to thumb a ride. He'd done it 100 times before, and he didn't think anything was unusual when the driver struck up a friendly conversation. In fact, he seemed like a real nice guy. He asked Jimmy if he played baseball in the park often. Jimmy told him they practiced 3 times a week and played a rival group on Friday afternoon. The stranger was a good listener, too, and it only seemed minutes before they pulled up in front of Jimmy's house. When Jimmy got out, the stranger gave him a friendly pat. Then he told him he'd see him again, as he always drove by the park on his way home. Sure enough, the following day, when Jimmy finished playing ball, well, the man was there waiting. They stopped at a drive-in, and the stranger treated him to a Coke. During their conversation, he told several off-color jokes, but Jimmy had heard others before, and, well, it made him feel big to so easily win the confidence of an older person. The following Saturday, they went fishing together. By now, they were using first names. Ralph said it was more friendly. Jimmy hadn't enjoyed himself so much in a long time. Then during lunch, Ralph showed him some pornographic pictures. Jimmy knew he shouldn't be interested, but, well, he was curious. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex. But by now, Jimmy felt a fondness for Ralph, and they continued to go places together. Ralph was generous and took Jimmy many interesting places and did many nice things for him. He bought presents and even gave him money, but payments were expected in return. You see, Jimmy hadn't recognized Ralph's approach soon enough. When Ralph first asked Jimmy to go fishing alone, he should have discussed it with his parents or teacher. Finally, Jimmy told his parents, and they reported it to the juvenile authorities. Ralph was arrested, and Jimmy was released on probation in the custody of his parents. But all homosexuals are not passive. Some resort to violence, as in the case of Mike Merrick. In the heat of competition, no one noticed the man who sat and watched. And when the game broke up and the others left, Mike decided to stay and practice a little longer. The stranger joined him. He was friendly and, well, it was better than playing alone. But after a few shots, Mike realized he had already overstayed his time and suggested he better leave. The stranger told him if he'd like to stay longer, he'd be glad to drive him home when they finished. Sounded great to Mike. Chance to play longer and get a ride home, too. finished, the stranger told him he'd make a fine player someday if he got lots of practice. The companionship, the praise, the friendly attitude dispelled any misgivings Mike might have had about going with a stranger. He probably never realized until too late that he was riding in the shadow of death. But sometime that evening, Mike Merrick traded his life for a newspaper headline. As Denny and Jerry got the papers ready for Jerry's afternoon delivery, they only casually noticed the two boys that raced by in the afternoon traffic, and they didn't pay much attention to the car that drew up shortly afterwards until the man called them over. Had two boys been by on bicycles? The boys nodded they had. Could they recognize them if they saw them again? Well, Denny guessed he could. Then hop in, the man said. Those are stolen bikes. Without giving it another thought, Denny got in and the car sped away. Jerry watched. He'd been told many times, if a friend got in a car with a stranger, to write down the license number. It didn't seem to apply, but, well, fortunately, he marked it down. When he delivered a paper to Denny's house, he asked his mother if they'd caught the boys that had stolen the bicycles. Denny hadn't returned, so he told her the story and gave her the paper with the license number. Being a careful parent, she decided to call the police. Jerry supplied the necessary information, and the stranger's car was quickly spotted. It was a good example of how important it is to always get the license number and description of any stranger who takes a young person off alone, no matter what they tell you. Public restrooms can often be a hangout for the homosexual. Bobby and his friends hadn't noticed the man who had been in the restroom when they changed, and as it was late, he suggested they take the shortcut under the pier, but the others preferred to take the more traveled way home. When Bobby recognized the stranger as the man in the restroom, the shortcut under the pier didn't seem like a good idea at all. After all, it's more fun to stay with your friends anyway. Bobby had made a wise decision. It may have saved his life. The decision is always yours, and your whole future may depend on making the right one. So no matter where you meet a stranger, be careful if they are too friendly, if they try to win your confidence too quickly, and if they become overly personal. One never knows when the homosexual is about. He may appear normal, and it may be too late when you discover he is mentally ill. So keep with your group, and don't go off alone with strangers unless you have the permission of your parent or teacher.
Policewoman attached to the juvenile division. I'm on a call from a very worried mother whose daughter is missing. Her daughter's name is Judy Miller. Judy enjoyed babysitting, but there weren't enough jobs among the people she knew, so she decided to advertise at the supermarket for extra work. Late the following afternoon, the phone rang, and Judy was offered a job for that evening. The man told her he and his wife were going out to dinner and that their regular could he pick her up in 15 minutes. Judy's mother hadn't returned when it was time to go, so she left a message by the telephone. When her mother came home, she found Judy's note and called the number to let Judy know she was home in case she wanted anything. A woman answered, but she didn't know anything about Judy and told Mrs. Miller she must have the wrong number. By midnight, Mrs. Miller was really worried. She phoned the police and was transferred to juvenile. I took the necessary information and assured her we'd do everything we could. She'd have to try to be patient and wait. The waiting lasted almost a week. Then the report came in. Judy's body had been found on a lonely desert road. The most difficult part of my job is bringing bad news to parents. You can never find the right words to tell a mother her daughter has been murdered. Judy hadn't done anything wrong, she'd only been careless. Careless about whom she'd trusted. In itself, there'd been nothing wrong about advertising for a job, but it led her to trusting a person she knew nothing about. A mentally sick person who used her innocent ad as an introduction to his act of violence. Being safe is often no more than applying good judgment in everyday life. One night while Barbara was babysitting, the doorbell rang. She didn't open the door, but called and asked who it was. A stranger said his car had broken down and could he use the phone. Barbara was very polite, but she told him she was babysitting and expecting a call from her parents. However, she was sure the next door neighbors were home and perhaps he could use their phone. The stranger thanked her and left. Now, Barbara had been polite and helpful, but she hadn't taken any chances. And when her father called, she was safe. Friday night was movie time for Sally and Elizabeth. Their parents alternated weeks taking them and picking them up. Friendships are easily made in a crowded theater, and when two older boys struck up a conversation and moved next to them, they were secretly pleased. At intermission, Sally found it flattering to have her friends see her in the company of older boys, and when they asked if they could take the girls home, she was all for it. She asked Elizabeth to call her folks and tell them that they could ride with a friend's parents. Elizabeth was tempted, but decided it wouldn't be right, and Sally was disappointed. When the show was over and they were leaving, the boys suggested that if Elizabeth couldn't go with them, why didn't Sally come? Sally thought it was a great idea and asked Elizabeth to tell her folks that her parents had picked her up. Elizabeth didn't like the idea, but Sally insisted. So, Elizabeth left alone. Not any of the boys she went with had a car, so it was fun riding with the older fellows. But when they drove right past her house, she became concerned. When they arrived at Lookout Peak, she was frightened. She tried to convince herself there was nothing to worry about, but when they parked off the road, she knew she had gotten herself into something she couldn't handle. midnight, her parents became alarmed and called the Nelsons. Yes, Elizabeth was home. Hadn't they picked up Sally? No, over an hour ago. Of course she could talk to Elizabeth. Between guilty tears, Elizabeth told what had happened. Sally had been found, dazedly walking down the road from Lookout Peak. It was a night they'll long remember. In fact, Sally may never be able to forget it. Often seemingly innocent places can turn out to be just where wrong associations are made. Mary met Robert at just such a place. Robert frequented the malt shop in his spare time, which was considerable, as he'd finished high school and didn't work. Here he sought out the company of younger teenagers because he wasn't accepted by those of his own age group. Mary and her girlfriend could always be found at the malt shop after school. Mary had seen Robert before and thought he was very good-looking, so she was naturally flattered when he singled her out and struck up a friendly conversation. He was fun to talk to, and they discussed everything from cars to movie stars. When he offered her a ride home, she was only too happy to accept. They drove around for a while and talked. Mary was a good listener, and Bob enjoyed nothing more than talking about himself. Mary knew her mother would be upset if she came home with an older boy, so Bob dropped her at the corner. After that, they saw a good deal of each other. At first, Bob was willing to see her at the malt shop, but as time went on, he became jealous of her friends and insisted on their spending more time alone. They began to go to secluded places, and their relationship became more intimate. Mary knew things were getting out of hand because Bob became more and more demanding, but not wishing to lose his friendship or the prestige she enjoyed from her friends for having an older boyfriend, she complied with his desire. Then Mary found she was in trouble and had to tell her parents. But now it was too late for advice, and Mary had to be taken out of school and placed under the guidance of juvenile authorities. Unfortunately, Mary's story is not an unusual one. Too many young girls are flattered by the attention of older boys and don't realize until too late that these boys, who cannot compete in their own age group, are often not well adjusted and will demand too much in a relationship with a younger girl. You see, it's often the things that are done without thinking that get young people into trouble. Trying to move too quickly into a world of grown-ups with a young person's faith often cause heartache and disaster.